Ambassador Krelvex had seen many worlds in his long life. He had walked on planets made of crystal. He had spoken with creatures that lived inside stars. He had watched empires rise and fall across the galaxy. But he had never felt true surprise. Not until his ship came to the small yellow star at the edge of known space. The Galactic Concordat had sent him on a simple mission. Go to the Outer Rim. Survey the young planets there. Record any signs of life and return home. It was supposed to be boring work. The kind of mission they gave to old ambassadors who had nothing left to prove. His ship, the Eternal Witness, dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the fourth planet of the system. It was a red world, cold and dead. Krelvex almost ordered his crew to move on. But then his science officer, a thin creature named Nyradine, made a sound of confusion. "Ambassador," she said, "I am detecting radio signals from the third planet." This was not unusual. Many worlds produce natural radio waves. But when Nyradine put the signals on the main display, Krelvex leaned forward in his command chair. These were not natural signals. They were organized, layered. Thousands of different frequencies broadcasting at the same time. "What species uses so many channels?" asked his weapons officer, a large warrior named Torax. Nyradine checked her instruments 3 times before answering. "I count over 50,000 separate broadcast sources. And, Ambassador, they are not speaking the same language. I have identified at least 6,000 distinct language patterns." Krelvex felt something he had not felt in centuries. He felt curious. "Take us closer," he said. "Slowly. And do not activate any weapons." The Eternal Witness moved toward the third planet over the next several hours. As they got closer, the signals became clearer. Nyradine began separating them into categories. Some were pure information, streams of data moving between points on the planet. Some were entertainment, stories and music and sounds that served no practical purpose. And some were simply people talking to each other across vast distances. "They have not achieved faster-than-light travel," Nyradine reported. "Their technology is primitive by Concordat standards. But, Ambassador, the complexity of their communication network is unlike anything in our records. They are talking constantly. All of them. All the time." Torax made a dismissive sound. "A noisy species is not a remarkable species. Perhaps they simply have not learned to be quiet." But Krelvex was not so sure. He had studied many civilizations. He knew that communication was the foundation of all progress. A species that talked this much, that shared this much information, was a species that was growing fast. "Open a channel," he said. "Standard first contact protocols. Let them know we are here." The message went out. It was simple, designed to be understood by any intelligent species. A mathematical sequence, a star map showing their location, and a basic greeting in the universal trade language of the Concordat. Then they waited, on the planet below. A young man named Daniel Hayes was working the night shift at a military listening station in the mountains of Colorado. He had joined the Space Force 3 years ago, hoping for adventure. Instead, he spent most of his time watching screens and drinking bad coffee. Nothing ever happened on the night shift until something did. The signal came through at exactly 2:47 in the morning. Daniel almost missed it. He had been reading a book on his phone, only half paying attention to his instruments. But something made him look up. A light was blinking on his console, a light that had never blinked before. He set down his phone and studied the reading. His heart began to beat faster. The signal was coming from beyond the moon. It was organized. It was repeating. And it was clearly not natural. Daniel picked up the phone and called his supervisor. Then he called the base commander. Within an hour, the signal had been confirmed by 12 different stations around the world. Within 3 hours, the President of the United States had been woken from her sleep. Within 6 hours, every major government on Earth knew the truth. They were not alone. The response from Earth came 12 hours after the first contact signal. Krelvex was resting in his quarters when Nirathine called him to the bridge. She was trembling when he arrived. In all his years of working with her, he had never seen her tremble. "Ambassador," she said, "you need to hear this." She played the transmission. At first, Krelvex did not understand what he was hearing. It was sound, but not language. Patterns of tone and rhythm that rose and fell like waves on an ocean. It was beautiful. It was complex. It was nothing like the simple mathematical response he had expected. "What is this?" he asked. "I believe it is art," Nirathine said quietly. "They are responding to our greeting with art." The music played on. It was something called a symphony, they would later learn. Written by a human named Beethoven who had been deaf when he created it. A man who could not hear had made something designed only to be heard. Krelvex did not know this yet, but he knew that he was listening to something important. After the music ended, the transmission continued. Voices spoke in dozens of languages. Each one said the same thing in a different way. "Welcome. We are glad you are here. We have been waiting for you." Krelvex sat in his command chair for a long time after the transmission ended. His crew watched him, waiting for orders. But the old ambassador did not know what orders to give. In all his centuries of service, no one had ever responded to first contact with a gift. No one had ever said welcome before asking what the visitors wanted. "Ambassador," Turak said carefully, "what do we do now?" Krelvex thought about all the species he had contacted in his career. The suspicious ones, the aggressive ones, the frightened ones. He had protocols for all of them, but he had no protocol for this. He had no protocol for a species that heard a stranger knocking at their door and responded with music. "We go down," he said finally. "We go down and meet them." Turak shifted uncomfortably. "Is that wise?" "We know nothing about them." Krelvex looked at the blue and green planet on his view screen. Clouds swirled across its surface. City lights glittered on the night side. Somewhere down there, 8 billion beings were waiting to see what would happen next. "We know one thing," the ambassador said. "They are not afraid of us. And that, my friend, is the most remarkable thing I have learned in 400 years. He stood and straightened his diplomatic robes. "Prepare a shuttle. I want to see these humans for myself." The meeting place was built in 17 days. It floated in the empty space between Earth and its moon, a small station made of metal and glass and hope. Humans called it Unity Station. They had never built anything so fast in their entire history. But then, again, they had never had a reason quite like this one. Katie Morgan stood at the window of the station and watched the alien shuttle approach. She was a scientist who studied life on other planets. She had spent her whole career looking at rocks and ice, searching for tiny bacteria and ancient fossils. She had never truly believed she would meet intelligent life from another world. Yet here she was, wearing her best suit and holding a bag full of gifts, waiting to shake hands with beings from across the galaxy. She was not alone. Behind her stood a small team of diplomats, scientists, and military officers. They had argued for days about what to bring, what to say, how to act. In the end, Katie had told them all to be quiet and let her handle it. "They came all this way," she had said. "The least we can do is be ourselves." The shuttle docked with a gentle bump. Katie took a deep breath and walked toward the airlock. The door hissed open, and she got her first look at Ambassador Krelvex. He was tall, nearly 7 feet, with gray skin and large dark eyes. He had no hair, and his face was shaped differently than a human face. But when he looked at Katie, she saw something familiar in his expression. She saw nervousness, She saw hope. She saw the same feeling she had inside her own heart. "Welcome to our home," Katie said. "We are very happy to meet you." Krelvex bowed his head. "Thank you. I am Ambassador Krelvex of the Tyranny Empire. I represent the Galactic Concordat, a union of many species. We come in peace." Katie smiled. "We were hoping you would say that." She reached into her bag and pulled out the first gift. It was a small plant in a clay pot with green leaves and tiny white flowers. "This is called a jasmine plant," she said. "It grows on our world. The flowers smell very nice. We wanted to give you something alive, something that shows what our planet can create." Krelvex took the plant carefully. He held it close to his face and breathed in the scent. His dark eyes widened slightly. "This is a gift?" he asked. "Yes, we brought other things too." Katie pulled out more items from her bag. A bar of chocolate, a small bottle of honey, a book with pictures that children used to learn about the world, a piece of music recorded on a small device. "These things are not valuable," she explained. "They will not help you build weapons or travel faster. But they are things that make us happy. We thought you might like to see what makes humans happy." Krelvex looked at the items in his arms. Behind him, his delegation was watching with confusion. They had expected demands. They had expected negotiations. They had expected humans to ask for technology or protection or a place in the galactic order. Instead, this small woman was giving them candy and flowers. "I do not understand," Krelvex admitted. "Why do you not ask for things? Why do you give instead of take?" Katie thought about the question. It was a good question. She wished she had a good answer. "I suppose," she said slowly, "we wanted you to know who we are before we ask for anything. We wanted you to see that we are not just hungry or scared or greedy. We have those feelings too, of course. All beings do. But we also love beauty. We love kindness. We love sharing good things with others. That is who we want to be when we meet the galaxy." The next several hours were spent in conversation. Katie introduced each member of her team. There was Ryan Mitchell, a soldier who had fought in wars and now wanted peace. There was Susan Park, a doctor who healed the sick. There was Christopher Bell, a historian who knew the stories of humanity's past. Each of them had questions for the aliens, and each of them answered questions in return. The aliens were most confused by human history. They could not understand how a species could survive so many wars, so many disasters, so many times when they had nearly destroyed themselves. Christopher spent a long time explaining the concept of hope. He told them about times when everything seemed lost, when humans had every reason to give up, but they kept going anyway. "Your species fights itself constantly," Krelvex said. "You have weapons that could destroy your world. You have hatred and fear and cruelty. How are you still alive?" Christopher smiled sadly. "We have all those things, yes, but we also have the opposite. For every act of cruelty, there is an act of kindness. For every war, there is someone working for peace. We are not a perfect species. We are a species that keeps trying to be better." Ryan Mitchell added his own thoughts. "I have seen the worst things humans can do to each other. I have also seen the best. I have seen people run toward danger to save strangers. I have seen enemies become friends. I have seen people forgive things that seem unforgivable. We are not special because we are good. We are special because we choose to be good, even when being bad would be easier." Krelvex listened to all of this. He recorded it on his devices. He asked more questions, but mostly he just watched. He watched how the humans looked at each other. He watched how they touched each other's shoulders when they spoke. He watched how they laughed and argued and interrupted each other like old friends dot at the end of the day. When the alien delegation returned to their shuttle, Kralvex stayed behind for a moment. He found Katie standing at the window again, looking at the stars. "May I ask you something personal?" he said. Katie nodded. "Of course. Are you afraid?" Katie thought about it. "Yes," she admitted. "I am very afraid. Everything is about to change. Our whole world is about to change. We do not know if that change will be good or bad. But I'm also excited. I have spent my whole life looking up at those stars and wondering what was out there. Now I get to find out." Kralvex stood beside her and looked at the same stars. For a moment, they were just two beings sharing a view of the universe. "I have met many species," he said quietly. "I have never met one like yours. You are young and loud and chaotic. You should not have survived long enough to reach this moment. But you did. And now I find myself wanting to know how the story ends." Katie laughed softly. "So do we, Ambassador. So do we." That night, Kralvex sent his first official report to the Galactic Concordat. He described the meeting, the gifts, the strange conversations about hope and war and chocolate. At the end of the report, he added a personal note. It said, "I recommend continued observation. These beings are unlike anything in our records. They may be the most dangerous species we have ever encountered. They may also be the most wonderful. I cannot yet tell which. Perhaps both." The message traveled across the stars at faster than light. And in council chambers and throne rooms across the galaxy, ancient beings began to wonder about the small blue planet at the edge of known space. The ships came one by one at first. Then they came in groups. Within 3 months, the space around Earth was filled with vessels from across the galaxy. They came to study the strange new species that had caught the attention of the Galactic Concordat. They came to learn about the humans. A research station was built in orbit around Mars. It was neutral ground, a place where aliens and humans could work together. Scientists from 19 different species set up laboratories there. They wanted to understand everything about humanity. They wanted to know how such a young species had come so far so fast. Dr. Anthony Cole was one of the first human scientists to work on the station. He was a biologist from Texas, a quiet man who had spent his career studying how life adapted to different environments. Now he found himself explaining humanity to beings who had traveled across the stars. "Your species is impossible," said the lead Velkari researcher, a being named Velshara. She was ancient by human standards, over 2,000 years old, and she had studied life on hundreds of worlds. "You should not exist." Anthony smiled patiently. He had heard this many times in the past few weeks. "What makes you say that?" Velshar pointed to a display showing the Earth. "Your planet has everything wrong with it. The temperature changes constantly. The weather is violent. You have earthquakes, volcanoes, floods, and storms. You have predators in every environment. And yet your species did not stay in one safe place. You spread across the entire world. You live in frozen wastelands. You live in burning deserts. You live on islands in the middle of empty oceans. How?" Anthony thought about the question. "I suppose we just refused to accept limits. Whenever something tried to kill us, we figured out how to survive it. And then we figured out how to live there." This answer did not satisfy Velshara. She brought in more researchers. They studied human biology for weeks. They found things that shocked them. Humans could survive losing large amounts of blood. Humans could recover from injuries that would kill most species. Humans could go without water for days and without food for weeks. Their bodies were designed for endurance in ways that seemed almost cruel. But the thing that disturbed the aliens most was human. Medicine. Dr. Patricia Webb was a surgeon. She had been brought to the station to demonstrate human medical techniques. When she explained what surgery was, half the aliens in the room had to leave. You cut open living bodies? Valshara asked, her voice shaking. You remove organs while the person is still alive? Patricia nodded calmly. Yes, we do it every day. Millions of times a year across our planet. And they survive? Most of them, yes. Surgery has saved countless lives. We can replace hearts, kidneys, lungs. We can remove cancers. We can repair bones and reconnect blood vessels. It is one of our greatest achievements. Valshara was silent for a long moment. Then she asked, How did you discover this? How did you learn that cutting open bodies could heal them? Patricia's face grew serious. We learned through trial and error. For most of our history, surgery was dangerous. Many people died. But we kept trying because the alternative was to let them die anyway. Our ancestors made sacrifices so that we could learn. And now we use that knowledge to save others. The military analysts had their own concerns. A team of Torani strategists had been given access to human history records. They studied every war humanity had ever fought. They counted the dead. They mapped the weapons. And they came to a conclusion that terrified them. This species should have destroyed itself long ago, the lead analyst reported to Ambassador Krulvex. They developed nuclear weapons over 80 years ago. They had enough bombs to burn their entire planet. They came close to using them several times. But they did not. Why? Lieutenant Commander Adam Green was assigned to answer their questions. He was a military historian, a man who had studied war his entire life precisely because he hated it. We came close, Adam admitted. There were moments when everything could have ended. But every time, someone chose not to push the button. Someone decided that survival was more important than victory. We call it deterrence. We built weapons so terrible that no one dared use them. That is madness, the analyst said. You created the means of your own destruction and then relied on fear to prevent it? Adam nodded. Yes, it is madness. But it worked. And in the years since, we have been slowly working to reduce those weapons. We are not perfect. We are not even close to perfect. But we are trying. The analyst shook his head. In our history, every species that developed such weapons used them. Every single one. They are all gone now. You are the only exception. Maybe that is what makes us different, Adam said quietly. We always have a choice. And sometimes, against all odds, we choose correctly. The months of study continued. The aliens learned about human art and music. They learned about human families and friendships. They learned about the strange human habit of keeping animals as companions. Not for food or work, but simply for love. A Concordat psychologist named Fenira became fascinated by human emotions. She interviewed hundreds of people about their feelings. She could not understand how humans could hold so many contradictory emotions at once. Love and fear, hope and despair, anger and compassion, all existing in the same mind at the same time. How do you function? She asked a young woman named Maria Santos. How do you make decisions when your feelings are so complicated? Maria laughed. Honestly, we do not always make good decisions. Sometimes our feelings lead us wrong, but sometimes they lead us right. Our emotions are not a weakness. They are what make us care about things. They are what make us fight for what matters. Fenira added this to her notes. She was beginning to understand something important. Human strength did not come from logic or order. It came from passion. It came from the messy, complicated, beautiful tangle of feelings that drove them forward, even when logic said to stop dot at the end of the examination period. The researchers gathered to share their findings. Representatives from every species spoke about what they had learned. The room was full of confusion and wonder and a little bit of fear. Valshara gave the final summary. Humans are fragile, she said. Their bodies break easily. Their lives are short. Their history is violent. By every measure we use, they should be a failed species. But they are not. They survive because they refuse to accept failure. They heal because they are willing to cut themselves open to learn. They have not destroyed themselves because, at the last moment, they always choose hope. She paused and looked around the room. I have studied life for 2,000 years. I thought I understood it. I was wrong. These humans have shown me that life is not about avoiding death. It is about choosing to live again and again, no matter how hard it becomes. The room was silent when she finished. The examination was over, but the questions it raised would echo across the galaxy for centuries to come. The emergency alert came at 3 in the morning, Earth time. A Concordat scanning station had detected a massive asteroid tumbling through the outer solar system. At first, no one was worried. Asteroids pass through all the time. But then the trajectory was calculated, and everything changed. The asteroid was heading directly for the research station orbiting Mars. Over 2,000 aliens were living there, scientists and diplomats from across the galaxy. They had 14 hours before impact, and there was nothing the Concordat could do to save them. Ambassador Krelvex received the news in his quarters on the station. He had been reading human poetry, trying to understand why they put so much meaning into words arranged in patterns. Now he stared at the message on his screen and felt a cold weight settle in his chest. How long until your nearest military vessel can reach us? He asked his communications officer. 23 hours, Ambassador. They will arrive 9 hours after the projected impact. Krelvex closed his eyes. In his long life, he had faced death many times. He had always accepted it as part of existence. But he had never thought it would end like this, crushed by a rock in a distant solar system. Far from everything he had known. The message went out to Earth within minutes. Military commanders and government leaders were pulled from their beds. Emergency meetings were called. And in a small office at the heart of the United Nations, a decision was made. Captain Lisa Morgan was asleep in her quarters aboard the USS Horizon when her communicator buzzed. She was the commander of Earth's first true deep space vessel. The Horizon had been built for exploration, designed to study the outer planets and test new propulsion systems. It was not a military ship. It was barely finished. But it was the only human vessel that could reach Mars in time. Lisa read the briefing as she pulled on her uniform. An asteroid, 2,000 people, 14 hours. Her ship had never been tested at full speed. Her crew had never faced anything like this. But she knew what she had to do before she finished reading. Wake everyone, she told her first officer, a steady man named Victor Ruiz. Full alert. We launch in 30 minutes. The Horizon broke orbit 40 minutes later. It pushed its engines harder than they had ever been pushed. The ship shook and groaned as it accelerated toward Mars. Lisa stood on the bridge and watched the stars blur around them. Captain, said her navigator, a young woman named Jenny Cho, at this speed, we will reach the station with 4 hours to spare. But I do not know how we are supposed to stop an asteroid. We have no weapons heavy enough. Lisa had been thinking about the same problem. The asteroid was massive, over 1 kilometer wide. The Horizon had small defensive weapons, designed to push away space debris. They would do nothing against something this size. Get me Chief Engineer Nathan Park, she said, and someone find me a geologist. Nathan Park had not slept in 2 days, even before the emergency began. He had been trying to fix a power coupling that kept overheating. Now he stood in the captain's ready room, covered in grease, listening to the most insane plan he'd ever heard. You want to blow it up, he said flatly. I want to break it apart, Lisa corrected. There is a difference. If we can split the asteroid into smaller pieces, those pieces will spread out. Most of them will miss the station. The rest will be small enough to burn up in the atmosphere or be deflected by the station's shields. And how do we split a kilometer-wide rock? Lisa pointed to a display showing the asteroid's composition. Dr. Henry Walsh, the ship's geologist, had been scanning it since they launched. There are fault lines, Henry explained. Natural weaknesses in the rock structure. If we place explosives in exactly the right spots and detonate them at exactly the right time, the asteroid will break along those lines. It is like cracking an egg along its seams instead of smashing it with a hammer. Nathan stared at the display. Do we have enough explosives? No, Lisa admitted. But we have nuclear fuel for the reactor, and we have Kevin. Kevin Brooks was the ship's demolitions expert. He was a quiet man from Montana who had spent 20 years blowing things up for mining companies before joining the space program. When Lisa explained what she needed, he scratched his chin and thought for a long moment. It could work, he said, finally. But I will need to place the charges by hand. Remote detonation from this distance is too unreliable. Someone has to go out there, plant the explosives, and set the timers manually. That is a suicide mission, Victor said quietly. Kevin shrugged. Maybe, maybe not. Give me a good pilot and a fast shuttle, and I might just make it back before everything goes boom. They reached the asteroid with 3 hours and 47 minutes to spare. The horizon matched speed with the tumbling rock, and Kevin climbed into the smallest shuttle they had. Jenny Cho volunteered to pilot. She was the best flyer on the ship, and she did not hesitate when she raised her hand. Lisa watched them launch from the bridge. She wanted to say something meaningful, something that would honor what they were about to do. But there was no time for speeches. There was only the mission. Come back, she said over the radio. That is an order. Kevin and Jenny worked for 2 hours on the surface of the asteroid. They drilled into the rock and placed charges at 16 different points. The asteroid spun beneath them, constantly trying to throw them off. Their suits were not designed for this kind of work. Their tools kept breaking, but they did not stop. On the station, Ambassador Krelvex watched the human ship through a telescope. He saw the tiny shuttle moving across the surface of the asteroid. He saw the flashes as charges were planted. He could not understand why these humans, these strangers, from a distant world, were risking their lives for people they had only just met. The shuttle pulled away with 7 minutes to spare. Kevin was unconscious in the back, his suit damaged by a rock fragment that had grazed his shoulder. Jenny flew faster than she had ever flown, pushing the small craft beyond its limits that the charges detonated exactly on schedule. For a moment, the asteroid seemed to hold together. Then, slowly, it began to split. Cracks spread across its surface. Pieces broke away and tumbled in different directions. The massive rock that had been aimed at the station became a cloud of smaller fragments spreading out across millions of kilometers of space. Most of the fragments missed the station entirely. A few small pieces hit the outer shields and burned away harmlessly. The station shook once, twice, and then was still. 2,000 aliens watched the debris field drift past their windows. They watched the human ship hanging in space, its engines cooling after the desperate race. They watched the small shuttle dock with its mothership, carrying 2 humans who had almost died to save them. Krelvex sent a message to the horizon. His hands were shaking as he typed. Why? He asked. Why did you come? Why did you risk everything for us? The response came from Lisa Morgan, standing on her bridge, exhausted but alive. You were going to die, she said simply. What else were we supposed to do? Krelvex read the message 5 times. Then he sent it to every world in the Concordat. He wanted everyone to see it. He wanted everyone to understand what kind of species humanity was. They were the kind of species that ran toward danger. The kind that risked everything for strangers. The kind that asked, what else were we supposed to do? as if saving 2,000 lives was simply the obvious choice. On 12,000 worlds, beings who had never heard of Earth read those words. And for the first time in a very long time, the ancient civilizations of the galaxy felt something they had almost forgotten. They felt hope. 1 year had passed since the first alien ship appeared above Earth. 1 year of questions and answers, of fear and wonder, of two civilizations learning to understand each other. Now the galaxy was about to make a decision that would change everything. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Concordat was the largest structure ever built by intelligent beings. It floated in the heart of a nebula, constructed from materials gathered from 1,000 worlds. Representatives from every member species had seats there, arranged in circles that rose toward a ceiling lost in mist and light. For 800,000 years, the Concordat had gathered there to make decisions that shaped the future of known space. Today, they were gathered to vote on humanity. Ambassador Krelvex stood at the central platform, looking up at the countless faces watching him. He had spent the past year preparing for this moment. He had gathered every piece of evidence, every report, every story about the strange species from the small blue planet. Now, he had to convince the oldest civilizations in existence to accept the youngest. "I know what you are thinking," he began. "You are thinking that humans are too young, too violent, too unpredictable. You are thinking that they have not earned a place among us, but they need more time to prove themselves." He paused and looked around the chamber. "I thought the same thing when I first arrived in their system. I expected to find primitives. I expected to find a species that would take thousands of years to reach our level. I was wrong." He activated a display that showed images from the past year. Humans and aliens working together on research stations. Human doctors treating injured Concordat observers. Human artists sharing their work with beings from across the stars. Yes, they are young. Yes, they have a violent history. But they also have something that many of us have lost. They have fire. They have passion. They have the stubborn belief that tomorrow can be better than today, no matter how dark today might be. An ancient voice spoke from the upper circles. It belonged to a being so old that no one remembered its true name anymore. "Fire burns," it said. "Passion leads to destruction. We have seen species like this before. They always fall. They always fell alone," Krelvex countered. "They never had the chance to join something larger than themselves. Give humanity that chance. Let them learn from our wisdom, and let us remember their wonder." The debate continued for hours. Representatives spoke for and against. Some feared what humanity might become. Others believed in what humanity could offer. The chamber filled with voices, arguments echoing off walls that had heard a million such debates before. Then a new voice spoke. It was Dr. Katie Morgan, the woman who had led First Contact 1 year ago. She had been invited to address the chamber as humanity's representative. Now she stood at the central platform, a single human among thousands of alien beings. She did not look afraid. She looked like someone who had something important to say. "I am not going to tell you that humanity is ready," she began. "I am not going to promise that we will never make mistakes or that we will never disappoint you. That would be a lie, and you deserve better than lies." She took a breath and continued. "We are a young species. We are still learning who we are and who we want to be. We have done terrible things to each other and to our world. We have wars in our past that shame us and problems in our present that we do not know how to solve." The chamber was silent. Every being was watching this small creature from the edge of the galaxy. But we are also a species that refuses to give up. When we fall, we get back up. When we hurt each other, we find ways to forgive. When we face the impossible, we find a way to make it possible. That is who we are. That is all we know how to be. Katie looked up at the countless faces above her. She thought about everyone back on Earth who was waiting to hear the verdict. She thought about her parents, her friends, every human who had ever looked up at the stars and wondered if they were alone. "You built something amazing out here," she said. "A civilization that spans the galaxy. Peace between species who were once enemies. Wonders that we can barely imagine. We want to be part of it. We want to learn from you and grow with you and add our voice to yours." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer but no less certain. "You have shown us that we are not alone. But I think we have shown you something too. We have reminded you what it feels like to be young, to be uncertain, to look up at the sky and wonder if you are good enough. Every species in this chamber was young once. Every species in this chamber had to take their first step into the larger universe. This is our step, and we are asking you to walk with us." The vote was called 1 hour later. Katie stood at the platform and watched the lights begin to flicker across the chamber. Each light represented a species casting their vote. Green for yes, red for no. The fate of humanity hung in the balance of those lights. The first lights were green. Then more still. Katie watched as the chamber slowly filled with green light, circle after circle voting to accept humanity into the Concordat. A few red lights appeared here and there, but they were lost in the growing sea of green. When the final count was announced, Katie felt tears running down her face. The vote was not just a majority. It was unanimous. Every species in the Galactic Concordat had voted to welcome humanity. The chamber fell silent. Not the silence of disapproval or uncertainty, but a different kind of silence. The silence of recognition. The silence of beings who had watched a young species take its first steps and remembered what it felt like to hope. Krelvex walked to Katie's side. He placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture he had learned from watching humans comfort each other. "Welcome to the stars," he said quietly. "Welcome home." The celebration lasted for days. On Earth, people danced in the streets. On stations and ships across the solar system, humans and aliens embraced and shared food and stories. The news spread across the galaxy at faster than light, carrying a simple message. Humanity had joined the Concordat, but it was the silence that people would remember most. That moment in the Grand Chamber when the ancient civilizations of the galaxy stopped and watched a young species take its place among them. That moment beings who had seen everything still found something that could make them wonder. In the years that followed, humanity spread across the stars. They brought their music and their art and their endless questions. They made friends with species who had been strangers for millennia. They discovered wonders that the Concordat had stopped looking for, and solved problems that had seemed impossible. And whenever someone asked how such a young species had done so much so fast, the humans would smile and give the same answer. The answer that had started it all. The answer that had proven who they were. People were going to die. What else were we supposed to do? It was not a complicated answer. It was not a clever answer. But it was the truth. And sometimes the truth is enough to change everything. The galaxy had been silent in wonder when they first discovered humanity. But the silence did not last forever. Soon it was filled with music and laughter and voices from 1,000 worlds, all speaking together, all reaching for tomorrow. And among those voices, clear and bright and full of hope, were the voices of humanity. Finally home. Finally among the stars. Finally exactly where they were meant to be.